Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Parenting and Pregnancy Podcast, where I sit down with parents and experts alike talking about all of the topics that affect you as a expectant mother and a new mother. So today I am excited. I'm here with Beka Clayton from uh, at beka.xo.co on Instagram, and we are talking about um, infant loss today. And I'd like to just start out by having Beka, if you would, tell us a little bit about
hmm
you and your story. I know
Yeah.
you're a big advocate talking about this, and I'd love to know why.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, Sydney. I'm really excited. I think that sharing more of these stories is just really important. That way, people who have never experienced it know how to support someone who has experienced it. And then those who are experiencing it know like they're not alone. They're allowed to talk about it and they're allowed to like find their own way of healing through it. Um, so a little bit about my story is that I have three babies. I have Killian, who is 5. I have Miles, who died at 19 weeks gestational age. And then I have Dempsey, who's our rainbow baby, and he will be 10 months old tomorrow. And, when we finally got pregnant with Miles, we'd been trying for a year. So it was technically like secondary infertility. We were just starting to think about getting into a fertility clinic and getting some testing done because, we've been trying for a second baby for a year and we're starting to feel like it wasn't ever going to happen. So when it did happen, it was so much of a relief. And I really thought, like, that's it. We've got 2 babies. This is going to be probably the completion of our family. This is going to be perfect. And I never once thought, as you really shouldn't, right? Like, I could lose this baby. Not because those, like, my sister has her own experience with multiple miscarriages and losses. And so it's not that I didn't know it was possible. It's just, I didn't think it would happen to me. Um, but my pregnancy oddly was so full of so much anxiety. And I didn't expect that either because it was my second time. I knew what to expect. I knew what my body was going to do. I knew my body was capable of carrying a full term pregnancy and having like an unmedicated birth and all those things. But I still had this thought in the back of my head. I was like, what if I'm not really pregnant? What if this is fake? What if I made this up? All these wild things. And then we had I think it was like our 13 week viability scan, and everything looked perfect. And I was like, oh, okay, good. I'm really pregnant. We can relax. This is going to happen. And I was so excited, glowing, like, I don't know. I just felt on top of the world. And this was early 2022 when the world was like going wild, right? Like we're in quarantine and a pandemic is happening. And I was like, I don't care. Life feels so good right now. We're about to have our second baby. And I don't really remember what happened or what switched, but I just remember I started thinking like, what if my baby dies? What if my baby die? And I actually Googled, will I know if my baby dies inside of me? And if you Google like miscarriage, it's like, oh, that's prior to 12 weeks. And I was like, well, I'm like 17, 18 weeks at this point. So obviously I can't have a miscarriage, right? But what if the baby just died? What would signs of that be? What would it look like? What would it feel like? And I remember I told my sisters that, and they were like, if you're so concerned, like, you need to go to the ER. And I was like, no, nothing's happened. I haven't had an injury. I'm not having pain. I'm not bleeding. Like, everything feels normal. I'm just having really weird thoughts. And so I know from having been in therapy, those are called intrusive thoughts. So I was like, that's all it is. It's just intrusive thoughts. And I tried to like reassure myself that it was fine. And then also because it was 2020 and we weren't allowed to have people come to our appointments with us, I'd gotten a home Doppler and I was using that to like find the heartbeat. And my husband was listening and my son, and they thought that was really special. And then just like one day I couldn't find the heartbeat anymore. And then again, I'm Googling, right? Like, I can't find the heartbeat on the Doppler. What should I do? How reliable are Dopplers? Where could the baby be? And the number one thing you'll see on there is like, if you're not a trained professional, don't use a home Doppler. They're not accurate. You don't know how to use them. They're only going to lead to like unnecessary panic. And so I kind of was reminding myself of that as well. And then finally, one day, after just being so anxious and having so many intrusive thoughts, I decided to just call my OB. And I was like, look, I'm just having so much anxiety. I just want to come in for like a well check just to make sure everything's okay. And the nurse on the phone it's not her fault. And I'm sure she deals with really nervous moms all the time who just want to hear, I'm sure it's fine. And that's all they need. But she was kind of pushy with me about not coming in. And she was like, what I said, I haven't felt him move. She's like, you're too early along to count kicks. Don't worry about movement. Like it's normal for movement to be irregular at the point you're at. And I was like, okay, I can't find his heartbeat. And she was like, you don't know how to use that thing. Don't worry about it. I was like, look, can I please just see my OB? Like, can I just get a scan or a check? And she's like, well, we're going to have to bill your insurance and it's going to be a whole visit. It's not like a quick pop by. It's going to have to be an hour on his schedule. We don't have anything available today. And I was like, I don't care about any of that. Like, even if I'm just coming in for you to say to me, everything looks normal, everything is fine, here's some pills for your anxiety, like whatever it was, right, that they were going to do to help this anxiety I was having, I wanted it. And so like, yeah, sure, you can come in. And I have been on the way over on the drive, I recorded a voice memo where I started talking, because I was blogging at this point. I started talking about anxiety and pregnancy and how I was already feeling like my anxiety was being dismissed. It wasn't being taken seriously. It's just like, you're fine. Whereas any other anxiety, we try to like help them through it, right? We give them coping mechanisms, but because I was pregnant, it was just being dismissed. So I was recording that voice memo thinking, fully expecting to walk out of my OB's clinic that day with like I feel so silly, right? As you do when you start panicking, thinking something's wrong, and then everything's fine. You're like, oh man, I got really worked up over nothing. It's fully what I expected. And my husband was like, do you want me to meet you there? And I was trying desperately not to let him into like my delusional worries. And I was like, no, it's fine. Don't come. You'll just have to sit in the parking lot. Don't come. And, still sitting in the waiting room, like I couldn't shake the feeling that it was already over. And I don't think I was putting the thought together of like, no, my baby has died. But in my head, I was just like, something isn't right. And I already know that something is not right here. So of course they started with like the nurse doing the Doppler, couldn't find the heartbeat. And she the whole time was like really chipper about it. Like, oh, it's fine. Happens all the time. Haha. Again, dismissive of like all the things I was feeling. And then they pulled out the ultrasound machine. And, as soon as they put the baby up on the screen, like it was very obvious, very clear. There was no movement. There was no heartbeat there. The baby was like sunken down, just the position it was laying in. To be blunt, it looked dead. Like there wasn't any denying it. And like my world shattered and, I sobbed and they called a doctor in and the doctor just kept saying like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing any cardiac activity. There doesn't appear to be, there weren't any definitive words being given to me, right? It was all like, there doesn't appear to be, or I'm not seeing any. And those things just sounded like it could be his error rather than like a full, like, this is what it is. And I actually had to ask them. And like, I don't know why I held on to this thought, but I'm like, no one should have to ask that out loud. Like it should be, I don't know, more gently delivered to them. But I had to say, I was like, is it dead? Is my baby dead? And they were like, I'm sorry. And that was it. So that was the very start of like, this is so uncomfortable. Even the medical professionals who I'm sure have seen this before didn't know how to say it to me. They didn't know how to gently deliver, hey, yeah, your baby has died. It was, I'm not seeing any it was rhetoric, right? Like that's all they had to give me. And it was so frustrating at the time. So then, we had to, of course, I had to call my husband. He had to come get me. Felt like hours of trying to walk out of the clinic, trying to like compose myself to get out of there, to get home, to like tell him what had happened. And then we had to wait that night for labor and delivery to call us to have a room available. They were full of all the ironic things, and so I went home and I was like, I'm just sitting at home knowing that I'm still pregnant with a dead baby and I can't do anything about it. It was just, I don't know. It was really mind bending because I was like, we're supposed to make dinner. We're supposed to pick up our 4-year-old, or he was 3 at the time, our 3-year-old from school. I have to wash dishes. Like I'm supposed to go to work tomorrow. Like all of these things in life that like just want to keep going. And you're just stuck in this place where like your world is falling apart. So we went to the hospital at like midnight the next day, and it was a Saturday. And I delivered Miles. He weighed about, I think, 10, well, he was 10 inches long. I guess I don't remember how much he weighed, but obviously it was under a pound, and I was still in this state of like, what am I supposed to do? Like, what's normal to do here? I remember so strongly looking for like the quote unquote right thing to do because I didn't want to do it wrong, right? I didn't want to I didn't want to do something in that time in that space that others were going to look at me and be like, "Oh my gosh, she's crazy. She did what? That's crazy." For example, they asked me if I wanted to hold him after he was born and I was like, "I don't know. Should I? Is that normal?" Of course I wanted to. Like every bit of my being wanted to hold him. But I was like, well, if I hold him, are they gonna think I'm weird? Like, oh my God, she's holding her dead baby. Like I didn't want to go through these motions as if he was alive and have someone think that I was in denial or like not grasping the situation. And looking back, I was so wrapped up in what others would have thought of me in that moment. And that's probably my biggest regret is that I didn't just do what I felt like I needed to do for myself. And I didn't know to like take the time in this space to just focus on myself in that moment. I was so concerned with like, what's he gonna think? What's she gonna think? Is this normal? Do other people do this? Um, but we had a really, really incredible nurse. Her name was Courtney. And I recently learned that she is the nurse. She's still there at the hospital. She's the nurse that they assign to moms who are coming in when they know that their baby is either terminal or their baby's already passed away and they're about to deliver like a stillbirth. She's the one that they call because she is so incredible in that role as just like a caregiver and a nurturer, because the whole labor took about I think it was 10 hours of, the induction with suppositories. And because of the suppositories, I couldn't get out of the bed, which is really awful, and the contractions weren't nearly as bad as with my first birth, which was an unmedicated hospital birth, but I didn't have freedom of movement. I couldn't like just, get up and move around. And of course, then there's the grief compounded with that because you already know your baby is dead. But even in that moment, still, when they wanted to induce me because of the doctor's verbiage in the clinic when he said like, I'm not detecting any cardiac activity or I'm not seeing any, signs of life. When they came in, they were like, okay, we're going to induce you now. I was like, wait. Nobody has confirmed to me that my baby is actually dead. Like you're all offering me sympathies, but no one has told me definitively, yes, we're sure. And I was like, my greatest fear in this moment is that you're wrong. Right. And I go through with this induction and I give birth and they're like, oh my gosh, he's still alive. And now essentially you know what I mean? Like, and looking back again, that it was just more of like my brain trying to make sense of things and trying to hold on and being in denial and trying to hold on to all that. But it wasn't ever something that you prepare for. And I thankfully am the type of person and I've had to grow into this over the years, but like when I need something, I ask for it. And when someone says, tell me if you need anything, if there's something on my mind that I need, I tell them, I'm like, you're offering to help. This is how I need help. So my best friend was like, please tell me if you need anything. And I was, oh, did we lose you? No.
Nope, you're good.
She's like, please tell me if you need anything. And I was like, I need you to look up what kind of decisions I'm going to have to make with his body, like with the remains of the baby. Like, am I going to be expected to take him, like, to bury him or to cremate him? Are they going to try to just like dispose of him? Like, I hate to use such graphic language, like dispose of him as like waste in the hospital. Like, what am I looking at? What should I expect? And so she was Googling like my options that I would have, because I was under 20 weeks, it wouldn't have been, he wasn't considered a stillbirth because he wasn't viable with life. And so it was just these different things. And then my sister-in-law, of course was like, tell me if you guys need anything. And I was like, well, we need someone to figure out like a funeral home. And it was so many things that you don't even think about, even if you are someone who has thought about like, having a miscarriage. Maybe you don't have your own experience, but you're familiar with miscarriages, and you know, like, well, this is what they kind of look like, and this is what happens. There's so many things after that you probably never think of. Like, you have to plan a funeral. You don't have to. Obviously, you can choose not to. You could choose to have like a private ceremony or cremation or nothing at all. But like for us, because we had we had a body of a fully formed baby. We had a funeral we had to prepare for. We had to like I took maternity leave. I don't know. There was just so many things that even looking back, I'm like, how did we even navigate so much? We had to figure out how to tell my 4-year-old that his brother was dead because he was very, very interested in my pregnancy and us having a baby and the thought of having a baby brother, like all these things. I was like, suddenly I have to tell all these people. It was even like I have to call my mom and like tell my mom that our baby died. How am I supposed to do that? Again, it was a situation where my sisters were like, tell me if you need anything. And I was like, I need one of you to tell mom and dad because I don't really want to talk about this with them. I don't want to talk to them right now, but they ought to know. So I need one of you to reach out to my parents and like tell them this happened. Um, and honestly, it was in my attempt to find a way forward. Like, how do I heal from this? What's my life supposed to look like? Or once again, what have other people done in a situation like this? What's quote unquote normal here now? So I got on Instagram and started searching like the hashtags and looking for different accounts, looking up baby loss and stories and life after loss and all these things. And I found out there's a whole community or a collection of women who have gone through this and are telling their stories, and it's easily something that we're like, oh, no one's talking about this. No one talks about pregnancy loss. And while that feels so true, as soon as I was looking for it, I was like, oh my God, this is everywhere. Everyone's talking about this, just not with me previously. And now that I've experienced it, now they are all talking about it with me. And in an attempt to heal, I started sharing our story, sharing about Miles, like the things that I had been through, really just publicly grieving him through my Instagram. And it brought a whole like other community of women who had gone through similar things and didn't know what to do. Like they were where I was at the start of this. Like, well, now I'm in it and I never thought I would be. So what do I do? How do I move forward through this? How do I find support, Um, and that is just kind of why I became such an advocate for it, like for the few people who were like, I had a loss around 18 or 19 weeks gestation, the same that you did. And I didn't think that it mattered or that they counted, or I didn't think I was far enough along to really grieve having lost a whole child. And them seeing me grieve Miles as a fully formed human, as a child, as a member of our family, it like gave them the space that they felt like they needed to grieve their own babies. And it just kind of became my mission. Like, number one, to keep talking about Miles and keep like his spirit here with us. And number two, to create the space for others that I looked for when I was like fresh in this. So I guess that's kind of my story of how we got where we are. Honestly, the short version.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I imagine that is the short version because I can only imagine, like you said, I've thought about it, but I haven't really thought that much about what it looks like after the fact. Like you were saying, you're grieving, but you
Yeah,
still have all of these things that need to be done and need to be addressed, and your world has stopped, but the rest of the world hasn't.
right.
Um, what would you say to mothers who maybe right now are in that same spot? Maybe maybe they're a little further down the line, but who feel like their world is over, their world's ended, but the rest of the world is still moving on.
Um, I guess number one is to take care of themselves and get help. And get help means like ask for help, accept the help, know what kind of help you need. which is easier said than done, right? Because everybody comes out with, well, tell me if you need anything. If you need anything, I'm here. I'm here for you. So it feels like we have this whole community of support around us. But so often the grieving person is like, I don't know what I need. I consider myself to be like this rare species who's like, no, this is what I need. Here's what I need. Here's what you can give me. And I'm not afraid to ask for it. But so many, they are, not because they're just scared, but like they don't know what they need. They don't know how to ask, and they don't know how people are really going to respond. Because so many times it's like, well, tell me if you need anything. And you're like, well, I need this, this, and this. And they're like, well, that's too big of an ask. I can't give you that. Right. But if as a newly grieving mother, or even like further down the line, if there's something you know that you need to tell your story, like you got to find someone to talk to, whether it's a therapist or an online community or a journal or your partner or whatever. Or like if you just need, I don't know. I mean, there's so many different things you could need, but discover trying to like put it into your own words what it is that you need so that you can ask for that help. That's a starting point, I think, with your healing journey, because what you need could be so different, and you can't really count on someone to know what you need unless you can figure out what it is that you need.
So it's kind of identifying the best you can what you need and using that support system to support you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so for me, in the early days, I needed somebody to do the mundane things that I couldn't do because doing them felt so disrespectful to the fact that my child had just died. Like going to the grocery store. I was like, you cannot expect me to like put on clothes and walk through a grocery store and buy groceries. Because in my head, I was like, these things don't matter. Nothing matters, but we still got to eat. My 4-year-old had to eat. You know what I mean? Like we still had to keep going. So when my mother-in-law said to me, hey, what do you need? I said, I need you to go to the grocery store for me. And she was like, absolutely. I got you. I will go. And if I had said to her, oh, nothing, we're fine, I would have been in a position where I had to go to the grocery store myself. And who knows what that would have looked like. Like maybe I would have made it. Maybe I would have been fine. And maybe I would have had like this huge meltdown in the middle of the grocery store and been forever like embarrassed. You just don't know. So being able to identify what you need and verbalize it so someone else is able to give you the help. Yeah.
So because you said you kind of view yourself as kind of this exception, of somebody who really feels confident enough to just answer that question, what do you need? I need this. Or also because
Mhm.
in that moment you may be so overwhelmed with what you need, or you might just think when somebody asks that, I need my baby back. What, for those who maybe
And
are
that's a lot
supporting
of it.
somebody, yeah. Um, yeah, I've heard that before. Like, what do you need? I need my baby.
I
I
need my
need,
baby back. And
I
everybody
need,
is heartbroken because they can't give that to you.
yeah. So
Yeah.
what message would you give to those who are maybe trying to support somebody going through this? Like, what maybe is a better thing to say? I mean, of course, that's well intentioned, but maybe what's some better
Yeah.
thing to say, or what's the best way you would
Mhm.
recommend somebody give that support?
To offer very, very specific things. And we had that. There are so many ways through my loss and looking back on it that I count myself among like the lucky ones. Because number one, I had somebody who said to me, I'm gonna bring you dinner tonight. Do you want soup or pasta? And again, it was like, she's right. I have to eat, but like, you expect me to go home and cook, you know? And so I was just like, we want soup. And she's like, great, I'm bringing it over. And she brought it right over, or my sister-in-law who was like, hey, I'm going to call the funeral home for you. Is that okay? So to offer very, very specific things when you can, right? And not everyone's going to know that you need to call the funeral home or that you're planning a funeral, but to say things like, I want to bring you food. That's a pretty easy one. Everyone has to eat. I'm going to bring you food. Do you want this or this? Don't give them overwhelming options of like, what do you want? Of course, because then it's going to be, I don't want anything. I'm going to bring you food. Do you want this or this? I'd love to come over and like help you tidy up your house. Can I come over tomorrow? Does that work? Very specific things like that, I think is the best best way to give like physical support, or even just, and this is, again, it's not for everybody because everyone wants something different, but even just, I would love to come over and sit with you sometime. And if you want to talk or share your story, I want to listen. Can I come over tonight? Can I come over tomorrow? Because that's going to take the decision making off of the grieving person's plate, but it gives them like a very obvious, like, helping hand or a listening ear. And a lot of times that's very, very healing.
That's an interesting suggestion, and I really like that because I think oftentimes, um, because it's an uncomfortable topic and you don't know what to say, you avoid it. And I like the way you put that,
Right.
to be able to just say, hey, I want to come and sit with you. And it might be hard to ask too, to say, hey, I want to talk about this. I want to discuss it. I like the way that you put that, it really opens a door nicely, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that I had quite a few people who, and I think it gets awkward because it's such an uncomfortable topic and people are concerned about looking too eager to hear a story of tragedy, right? There's a little bit of attraction to tragedy, like when you want to look at a car accident and like you have to know what's going on, or a train wreck, you can't look away. So when you have this heartbreaking story, people, they want to hear it, but I think they're concerned about looking like they're coming from a place of curiosity rather than care. But for me, somebody who was like, hey, so like, what happened? Do you want to tell me? It was huge because it told me that they were there and willing to be uncomfortable with me, and they were willing to let me put them in an uncomfortable position of hearing this whole story dredged out for the sake of my own healing, because it was repeating the story over and over gave me a chance to analyze portions, and kind of determine why I was feeling the way I was feeling, and identify like other like triggers for me or pain points or things that I was like having a harder time rationalizing so that I could heal those portions. And talking about it was just so huge. And so yeah, for someone to be like, you can tell me your story if you want to, was amazing.
That I really like the way it is too, like if you want to, to open that, because it sounds
Yeah.
like that's something you really needed. I think
Hmm.
a lot of the mothers that I've met were probably in that same boat, but not everybody's the same. Not everybody handles it the same.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's a very assertive way to go about it while still being very respectful.
Hmm.
So you're not dancing around the topic there.
Right.
Um,
And I think that's honestly why so many people have a hard time supporting the grieving in a more assertive way of like, I'm bringing you dinner. What do you want? Because they think, well, what if they don't want dinner? What if I hurt their feelings? What if they just want to be alone? What if they don't want to talk about it? Yes, but for you to just pull away from them, be like, I'm going to give you your space. It now tells the grieving person that you're not available to help them through this, either because you can't handle it or you don't want to. So it's actually, in my opinion, and everyone is different, in my opinion, it's better to be more assertive with the help you're offering and leave it on the grieving person to say no thank you, because honestly saying no thank you is a whole lot easier than saying I need your help right now, I need you to be here for me right now.
Sorry, I was muted there for a second. Um,
No, it's
I
okay.
I think that that's some really helpful advice to those maybe trying to support somebody going through this. Um, my my next question would be that I kind of just developed as you're talking, is it sounds like you had a lot of really supportive people.
Yeah. Yeah,
Did
we did.
you have anybody around that wasn't as supportive, or maybe didn't view your feelings on the topic as valid as you believed that they were?
So that's another situation why I count myself really lucky. In the beginning, I did not have a single person who told me, well, it was so early. well, you've got other kids. Well, maybe you should look at it this way. Not a single one. They were all, and I think that goes into a couple of things. Like we were 19 weeks pregnant when he died. We had a body, we had pictures, we had a whole funeral, we buried him, we have a grave, you know what I mean? Like all these things that humanize him more in other people's minds, other people who didn't have any connection to him essentially, right? They weren't me, my husband, or son, grandparents, friends. And so to them, it was like, yeah, her child died. And because I was so far along, I never really used the term miscarriage. I said, like, we lost the baby died. So again, it was very humanizing of Miles to them. And I just, I grieved very like publicly, like, this is how I felt about it. This is how I'm going to refer to him. This is how I'm going to share my story. Like, we talk about the day he was born, not just the fact that he died. Like, we call him by his name. We celebrate his birthday, all those things. But later down the road, I don't know if it was like they expected me to stop grieving, or it was something specific I had said. I didn't really get an explanation, but I did have some fallout since then. Maybe I was already pregnant with Dempsey. It might have been 9 or so months later when they were like, it was actually a friend of mine who had her own loss soon after I found out I was pregnant with Dempsey, and she chose not to share it with me, which was, already kind of hurtful, because it's like, what, out of everyone in your life, you thought I wouldn't understand. But she admitted, she was like, well, now that I've had my own loss, I feel differently about mine than you clearly do about yours. And I think it just put up this wall between us of like, now she couldn't understand why I chose to view our loss and grieve our loss the way I did, when she wanted to view and grieve her so differently. And our styles of grieving just, they weren't compatible. And I think her watching me grieve made her feel a little bit like she was supposed to grieve the way I was grieving. So she had to take a step back from my life, which, it really hurt, because it felt like secondary loss. Like, I've already had a loss and now I'm losing a best friend. But that was really the only instance, besides like trolls on the internet. We're storming, so my power might go out. So which means my Wi-Fi might go out. But yeah, besides just strangers on the internet who, like, I don't give them any credence, that was the only thing. And I know that so many people don't have that, but we just had a really amazing support system here. We live near my husband's family, and they're just incredible, and we have a lot of the same views and beliefs on things, so that's helpful in having them kind of validate like what it is that we lost and how it is that we're grieving.
Well, I'm really glad that you did have that support. So I guess you didn't deal with close friends and family that initially were experiencing kind of some different views on it, and struggling to see where you were coming from. But would you have any advice for maybe mothers who are in that spot, who they're grieving in one way,
Hmm.
and the people that they want to be there to support them aren't validating that?
Yeah, I've had that come up a lot in my online space on Instagram. People saying, like I kind of mentioned earlier, people who have had losses around the same time, and they're like, well, I was told that like it didn't count because I was so early. And in my head, like 19, 20 weeks is not early. That's halfway through. Like, you were starting to count down instead of count up. But my advice, and everyone's personality is different, so it kind of depends like which way you want to play it. My number one advice is just tell them to F off. Tell them it's your loss and you get to grieve it how you want. And it was your child. And if you want to talk about them and grieve them and hang up a stocking for them at Christmas, then do it, because nobody else matters except you. But that's my own personality, right? And not everybody wants to stand up that way. And not everybody wants to deal with the fallout that comes with that relationship that you've now alienated and isolated. So, my second piece of advice, if you can't do that, would be to go back to the very beginning when I said you really need to be able to identify what it is you need and vocalize that and ask for that. Like, these are your children. And this is part of my statement on Instagram. Like, you have to advocate for your children, even your dead children. And if somebody is trying to invalidate their existence and their life, you're their mother. And it's your job to say, no, my babies mattered. Like, it's really important to me that you recognize them as my child or as your grandchild, or, it would really make me feel better if you would include their name in a list of your grandchildren or whatever the situation is. So to be able to just speak up about that, but to do that, you first have to know what it is that you want. Do you want them included in a list of grandchildren's names? Do you want people to like say you're a mother of 3, or would you prefer, for them to say, yeah, she's got 2 kids, So you have to identify what it is that you actually want and then speak up about it. And I just think that that's really hard. Like, I'm not oblivious to the fact that that's so hard for so many people. But that is, I think, the first step in changing the narrative around pregnancy loss or infant loss, and just being like, we as the mothers get to decide how this feels going forward and how our children are referred to and how they're recognized.
That makes a lot of sense, that really the first
Yeah.
step is identifying what it is you need so that you can seek that out, advocate for that, and then I would I hope I can venture on to say seek out those who can support you in that way. Even if you're
Absolutely.
not interested in
Yeah.
alienating that relationship, seek out the support from those who are more willing to support you in the way that you need,
Right.
and yeah.
I guess so. I actually kind of forgot. So I want to mention. So I did not disclose to my own parents that we had lost the baby. I had my sisters do that for me. And so I was hearing all of this after the fact, which is why it slipped my mind. But my dad's response was actually, "Oh, that's sad, but this happens all the time." And my older sister, I think, was the one who was speaking to him, and she had had her own losses. All of them were, much earlier. So she even treats them a little bit differently than I treat mine, which is absolutely fine. Again, it's her loss. She gets to treat them how she wants and grieve them and view them however she wants to. But she spoke up to him and said, "Well, Dad, this wasn't just like, oh, she's no longer pregnant and she had a heavy period. Like, she's going into the hospital to get induced and she's going to deliver like a fully formed human baby, and like they're going to bury it." And he was kind of like, oh, I didn't realize. And so it was just a really great example of how his mindset was different. But as soon as somebody presented to him, no, this is different, and this is how Becca's viewing this, he was very, very receptive. And I would hope, and of course not everybody is, but I would hope that a lot of people, their initial reaction of, "Oh, well, it was so early," or "My dentist told me, oh, you're young, you'll have more kids," and I wanted to be like, that's not the point here. And it was just my dentist, though, so I didn't really go anywhere with that. If it had been my mom, I would have been like, "You know what, Mom, you and I have this relationship, so we need to iron this out. I can't just like let this sit between us." But most people, I think, when you challenge their initial reaction, they're willing to accept your point of view on something like this, on something so personal and emotional that you're going through. So, to hold them accountable for kind of accepting the way you want to view it, you first have to tell them how you want to view it. Like, you have to give them a chance.
And to somebody who's not educated about, what's the difference between a baby at 18 weeks versus 5 weeks versus, different stages, like it might be really illuminating to somebody to point out, no, she's going
Yeah.
to deliver Miles right
Right.
now.
Right. So the only thing I'll say about, like, they might not know that it's different is that for a lot of people, myself included, the way, at least I think, I don't have any experience with early loss. To me, though, what you've lost is not different. It does not matter if you're 5 weeks, 12 weeks, 15 weeks, and, even full term. you've lost a full child, you've lost a full member of your family, you've lost a full lifetime, you've lost hopes and dreams and like plans for your future. You've lost so much. Physically, yeah, it's different. Like at 5 weeks, 8 weeks, you just go home and wait it out. Tragically, they say it's like a heavy period, which it's not. I've heard it's miserable. Whereas, 19 weeks, you get the option of like a D&C or to deliver vaginally, and we chose to have a full like induction. But yeah, they might have no idea. So especially somebody like my dad, who is in his 60s, I guess, and a man, and so his idea or understanding of like the female reproductive system might be nothing. He might just be like, oh, I don't have a big deal. I hear this word thrown around all the time, miscarriage, and it doesn't really mean anything. He has no concept of it. He's never experienced it himself. My mom never experienced anything like it. So yeah, I think that, again, just kind of letting them know, educating them, saying, well, no, it's different, and this is how Beka's viewing it, is going to be really eye-opening for them.
I could see how that would be really eye-opening, and you make a good point, and I wish I had worded that differently, because you're right. It's the loss of your child, regardless of at what
Yeah.
point. What would you say then to mothers who are maybe they're losing their baby before that point of, where it's an induction, where you have that option where it is just that heavy period, what would you say to those mothers who maybe are having even harder time getting that experience validated from those around them, because everyone views
Yeah.
it differently and feels differently about
Yeah.
it, but also because everyone's like, well, it's just a heavy period. It's just, what would you say to
Mm-hmm.
those mothers? Or to
They're in a
those
tough.
who are saying that same thing to people going through it?
Yeah. I think that those mothers who were so early that they're having a hard time getting anybody to validate the life of their child, that they're in such a tough place, because now they have to advocate for that baby even harder than I had to advocate for my son, who, like, it was very easy to prove that he was a human who died. Like, look, there's a grave. We got to bury him, you know. Um, but that there are still ways, actually, there's an account on Instagram that I follow. She talks about how to like catch your baby even through a loss like that, like with a strainer in the toilet. Every time you go to the toilet, just like put the strainer in there, and then you can find like the baby's tiny body and put it in a small container. And she actually shares a lot of resources. Like, a lot of funeral homes will offer free services to unborn babies. So to some, that might not be anything they want. They might want nothing to do with like this tiny baby fetus, but others, that could be really healing for them, because they have some like a physical thing. They can take it, get it cremated, and keep a small urn. And anything that's going to make you feel like your baby mattered more, that they truly existed, I think is going to be helpful in honoring them and in humanizing them to others, to say, like, look, they existed, and here's proof. Because otherwise those babies get forgotten so easily and so quickly by others, not by the mother certainly, but by those around her.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they do get forgotten a lot or brushed aside. Um, and it's almost viewed as this haphazard risk of pregnancy, especially like in the first trimester, especially because, like you said, you look it up and you're like, oh, I'm past 12 weeks. I won't lose my baby,
Yeah.
and so I think I'll have you, if I can, send that account to me, and I will put that
Yeah.
account in the description or in the
Yes.
show notes, so that people can go
Mm-hmm.
check her out if anyone's
Mm-hmm.
interested, because I think that is a really helpful resource, because I think a lot of mothers, even going through it, because they're so used to that mentality of, it's just a risk of getting pregnant, is you might lose the baby, and not
Mm-hmm.
realizing that there are ways to remember that baby. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll share her account. I believe it's Kiara Butcher, but I'll send it to you so we can get it right.
okay, perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll put that down below. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I guess the other big thing I wanted to talk to you about, you touched on it a little bit, but it was kind of the dismissive nature of the doctors and the nurses, and and I do
Mm-hmm.
get if they're just especially in the beginning, wanting to comfort you, but you knew something wasn't right. You knew that you weren't finding the heartbeat on the Doppler. Like, what would you say to mothers who maybe are making that call to their OB that's saying, hey, something's not right, I want to come in, or I think something's not right, like who are
Mhm.
getting that pushback?
You know your body. And even if you don't know that you know your body, like in your head, you're like, no, I don't know. I don't know anything that's going on. I have no, y- you do. And your body is so much smarter and more in tune with pregnancy than a doctor could be. So, like, you make that phone call and they're like, I'm sure everything's fine. And your first inclination is to go, oh, well, a nurse said it's fine. So it must be fine. But honestly, she has no idea. She hasn't looked at you, she hasn't touched you, she's done nothing. And so if you're having those feelings, a lot of times, yeah, they turn out to be just anxiety, just intrusive thoughts. Everything is fine, but there's this stigma or this shame around like crying wolf, right? Like, well, I thought something was wrong, so I wanted to check, and now it's fine. So the next week when I think something's wrong, well, now I feel silly, so I'm not going to do anything. But if you're that person who's gone into your doctor's office every 2 weeks thinking like, I think something's wrong with my baby, and they constantly find that everything is normal, what have you lost? What are they out, right? Like, so you had an extra appointment. Okay, if that's what you need for peace of mind, then take it, because you are your strongest advocate, and a doctor or a nurse is just going to give you the same rundown they give every other person. And only you really, really know what you're experiencing and what you're feeling.
So just be that advocate for yourself. It sounds like what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Kind of who cares if they're giving you that pushback? Do what you
Hmm.
believe is right for you and your baby.
Absolutely. That's my biggest mission on Instagram. I must say that to a million people, like, all the time. Like, you are the advocate for yourself, for your health, for your baby, for your family. Like, you're the gatekeeper of all of these things. And we forget that.
I like the way you put that. You're the gatekeeper of all of these things.
Hmm.
Um, and can I ask, so you were mentioning the intrusive thoughts and this anxiety and things like that. Um, and it sounds like things just weren't sitting well throughout the whole pregnancy. When you were pregnant with Dempsey, did you experience that same anxiety? Was it different anxiety? Was there no
Hmm.
anxiety? Were you more at peace? Like, what was that experience like being pregnant with Dempsey after losing Miles?
So I did have some anxiety with Dempsey. It was not nearly the same. I would say that it was really just this normal anxiety that comes with pregnancy after loss. Like, every morning I would wake up, and before I would feel him move, because I feel movements very, very early with all of my babies. But before I'd feel him move in the morning, I would go, well, I hope he's still alive in there. It was so casual, and it kind of hurt my heart. Like, it broke my heart that I was so casual about the fact that this baby might die too. But underneath all of that was this trust for my body and for this pregnancy. And, all of the healing I had done the year prior had taught me to trust my body. Like, if I thought everything was right, it probably was. And if I thought something was wrong, it probably was. And I never really had this thought of like, oh my God, I think something's wrong. I think once or twice he would go kind of still and I wouldn't feel him for a day. And I'd get into this like spirally panic of like, oh my God, I haven't felt it. What's wrong? What's going on? And this pregnancy again, I got a fetal Doppler and I would listen to his heartbeat and I could find it every single time, which I know is not everybody's story because baby's position and placenta position like interferes with all that. But for me, I could always find his heartbeat. And that was very, very reassuring. So as much as they caution against not using a home Doppler, I was like, I don't care. I'm going to use it because it makes me feel safer. And I spent a lot of time doing like meditation activities where I would just kind of emotionally connect to the baby and be like, I know you're going to make it. I know that you're strong. We're going to get through this together, you and me. And I prayed, and I was like, okay, if the baby's still alive, let him get the hiccups. And he would get the hiccups nearly like 4 times a day. It was really, honestly, it was annoying how often he would get the hiccups. But that became my sign of him telling me, like, hey, everything's okay when he got the hiccups. Um, so that was really helpful. But, there was just the normal amount of anxiety. And I would say after the point that Miles had died, so like 18, 19 weeks pregnant, the anxiety started to get less and less. Um, every time I would go visit my gynecologist, my OB, though, it was the same office at the time. We ended up switching to a midwife and a home birth later in pregnancy, which is really incredible. But for a while, we were getting care through the same office that we had been in when we found out Miles had died. So I think it was just triggering. And I wasn't really admitting it at the time. I was like, no, I'm just nervous. No, I'm just anxious. I'm just worried that he's dead. But I think it was honestly just the location and going back in there to that same place with the same staff members. So once we got past the gestational age that Miles had died at, and then when we switched to a home birth midwife and I got to stay home and she came to me to do all the visits and she was such a calming presence, the anxiety all but lifted. And, I was like, I don't have any doubts. Like, I fully believe in this baby and like, he's going to be ours. He's going to be healthy and alive.
So it sounds like also getting that more empowering care really helped you be able to trust yourself and your baby.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Because my OB started saying things like, and I know some moms, they want this. And if that's what they want, I'm for it. Speak up, ask for it, again, advocate for those things. But my OB started being like, we're going to do weekly non-stress tests. We're going to do weekly ultrasounds to check on your baby. And at first I thought, yay, I get to see the baby more. But then I said, well, why? Why do you want to do those? And he was like, well, because your last pregnancy had such an unfavorable outcome. And it just threw up this red flag where I was like, he doesn't trust me. He no longer trusts my body and he doesn't trust this baby. So how can I, as somebody who really desires a natural, unmedicated, hands-off birth, even though I was intending to birth in a hospital, how can I go into birth with this OB that I know already thinks I'm not going to be able to do it? He already thinks I'm going to fail because I, quote unquote, failed once before. Like, I already had a baby die. So he's already here thinking this baby might die too. And I knew immediately I didn't want or need that in my pregnancy and certainly not in my delivery.
I am really happy that you sought out that midwifery care then, because I can only imagine how that could have manifested in your delivery. Both
Yeah.
in your trusting yourself and your baby, and if your doctor has lost trust, is he going to be more quick to induce, more quick to, let's bring on some pitocin, and oh, heart
Mm-hmm.
rate's just looking a little wonky. Let's do a C-section
Yes.
just to be sure, because like you said, he's already lost trust in that. And of course, I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
wanting to avoid the same thing, well, if we just do a C-section right now, we know we're going to have this baby
Right.
safe,
And would I have maybe gone along with it because of my past experience of having already lost a baby? Like, maybe in my first birth, I'd have been like, no, get out of here. We're fine. But we've already lost a baby. We've already been a part of that, like, small percentage of people who lose pregnancies in the second trimester. So, like, what would my mindset have been had I been sitting there, like, collecting all this information from him? So, yeah, I am. Who knows? Who knows what this birth would have looked like for us?
Well, and I've seen some of your stories about it on Instagram, and it sounds like it was a very beautiful birth. So I'm
It was
glad you were
so
able to have
incredible.
that experience with
Highly recommend.
Dempsey.
Me too. Thank you.
Um, well, I could probably sit here and talk with you about this for hours. And maybe if
Yeah.
you're ever interested in coming back, we can do another episode. But I think this is a good place to end it, kind of on a more positive note of
Yeah.
really trusting yourself and your baby, and now
Mhm.
we have happy and happy little Dempsey.
Yeah.
So,
10 months
oh, are you still
has
there?
not yet been told. Yes, can you hear me?
Sorry, the last thing I heard was you said yes, 10, I'm guessing 10 months, and then I lost you.
Oh, 10 months. He'll be 10 months old tomorrow. And I just appreciate you so much letting me come on and share this for another mom who maybe has never heard, hey, you're allowed to speak up for these things. You're allowed to ask for more tests back and say, no, I don't want that. Or you're allowed to say to your family after you've gone through loss, hey, I need help with this. I need you to come over and sit with me. I need you to bring me food and do my grocery shopping. Because if you've never heard someone say, hey, you're allowed to do that, you might just have no idea.
Well, I'm grateful to have you on because to share that with mothers. So, and I'm grateful for everything that you're doing over on Instagram and sharing Miles' story and your story, and I know you have a lot of other great content as well, as trusting yourself as a mother,
Mm-hmm.
and your intuition, and trusting your intuition and things like that. So I will have your handle down in the show notes for anybody who wants
Thank
to learn
you.
more about you and what you do. Are there any resources you want to mention right now before we
Um,
end this?
yeah, I want to plug my website if that's okay.
Oh, yes,
Um,
yes.
yes, so I have my website over at www.bekaxo.com. It's where I started blogging. So it's all of my content back from when I first became a mom, through my loss, through more recent things. Um, and then over there, I also have a free downloadable guide for somebody who wants to give birth in a hospital. All those things about like how to advocate for yourself through a hospital birth if you're looking for a more hands-off thing. So it's just kind of like my little passion project of showing moms how to advocate for themselves when maybe they've never seen it before. So
Well, that is fantastic. Do you have any other? I guess I did not go and take a look at your website before we
that's okay.
did this. Are there any other services that you, are there any services you offer or anything like that?
That's all I have right now, besides, my blog with the resources there. But I'm starting a podcast soon, my own podcast, where I'm going to be able to share these bigger opinions that don't quite fit in Instagram stories. Like the Instagram stories are so small, and if you get too heavy there, people tend to lose interest. But I hope to have a lot more coming soon. It's very, very new for me to start branching out to different avenues, but I'm excited about it.
Well, I will be on the lookout for that, and I hope everybody
Thank
else is
you.
as well. So, okay, Becca, well, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Sydney. I really appreciate this. And I think what you're doing with sharing these perspectives from others is really incredible. So keep doing it.
Thank you. All right, guys, I will see you in the next episode. Bye.